Deep breath, because I already made this video. And I was interrupted, which I guess would turn out to be a good thing, because apparently I wasn't recording sound. I found out when I went to edit. And then QuickTime froze, trying to record the second half. And boy, some days these things are a labor of love. But so two things. First, I want to mention that I am sort of going on my summer hiatus a week from today. So I think I've talked about this many times. I'm working on my master's degree, and I have my final residence uh, next starting next week through July. So I'll probably not be making many videos, which is why I've been sort of making so many lately, so that I could kind of stock up on them. So I'll be gone through the end of July, probably back to the beginning of August. Sorry, I have a spring cold. I'm going to start with let me just get all the complaints out. Allergies for the last 3 weeks, sinus, eye itchy, sneezing, coughing, and now I have a spring cold. So some water here. So the real reason for this video is not for me to complain about QuickTime, doorbell ringing, or my health, but on my third-party readings video that I did recently, Wolf of Coins raised a great point and a great question. They said, sometimes we get questions like, are we destined to be together forever? Will I ever find true love? And they said, I'm curious to hear your view on such questions. And I thought, you know what? I have views on these questions, and I'm going to share them. And I'll make a video on them. So there's just so much to unpack here. And one of the reasons why I'm kind of distraught that I lost the video is that as I was talking about it, things popped up that were, I think, really kind of revelations for me too. So I'm gonna try to get to all of them. So it's a funny thing with questions like, will I ever find true love? Are we destined to be together forever? When will I find true love? Those kinds of things, because there's so much at play in that question. And one of the things that's at play is the reader's bias. So I actually don't get questions like that very often, if ever. And I think one of the reasons why is, like, a lot of people who book me for readings found me through YouTube, and so they've seen how I read and how I talk. And so they're probably likely to pass on me if they want that question. Also, the kinds of readings that I offer are pretty specific. So I think that's one reason why I don't get questions like that. But they are out there, and I have gotten them. But the bias of the reader comes into play, right? Because I don't believe in true love. I don't think that's a thing. I think that the idea of true love actually comes from a culture of fairy tales where a story ends once the prince and the princess kiss on their wedding day. And we get sweeping music and the credits roll. And that ain't the story. That's where life starts for those relationships. You know what I mean? So everything that happens after it. One of the reasons why I always loved Into the Woods was that it goes into, what happens ever after. So I think that, and this is a bias of mine that I'm fully aware of, I think kids in the United States in particular, I can't speak for other countries, are raised, and I would say probably this is more prevalent among young women, because of like the Disney princess culture, which certainly has some empowering elements to it. But I think kids are raised with the idea that true love is a thing, certainly in movies and songs, maybe not in their actual real lives when we look at the divorce rates and stuff. But I think people believe that true love is a thing that's real, and I don't. I think that I think that relationships are all settling, and that sounds really grim, and it sounds really sad, but I don't mean it that way. Everything in life is deciding what you're willing to settle for, because everybody's fucked up. You know what I mean? We've all got issues. We've all got baggage. We've all got shit that we bring with us, and we're all flawed. So there's no Prince Charming. There's no perfect person out there. And so if you decide that you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, you're deciding to settle for their flaws, which of course we should, because we do it every day. We do it with our friends. We do it with our families. We do it with our jobs. We constantly have to settle. So true love has a really big romantic notion behind it, and I have a really big bias against it. So that's one reason or one way in which that affects me. Another way in which it affects me is sorry, again, phlegmy fun times. Another way in which it affects me as a reader is that I know that it doesn't happen for everybody, and everyone, in a generic editorial sense, everyone believes that they'll have it. Everyone believes that it's possible. Again, it's a very cultural thing, I think, for a lot of folks. And the reality is that I know in my life great people who don't, and it's mind-boggling why they don't, but they don't. So it's not a given, you know what I mean? People don't find their soulmate, and I believe that a soulmate isn't one person. I think that your soulmates are not someone that you go to bed with necessarily. They're not necessarily the people you marry. They could be, and hopefully, a lot of times they are. They're the person, the friend, the family member who, when you pick up the phone or send them a text, they tell you, I was just thinking about you. Those are your soulmates, you know what I mean? And you probably have more than one. So I have a very pragmatic view of the world. And so the idea of true love and soulmates right out of the gate is like, no, you're not going to find those things because they don't exist. Same thing with the idea of like, will we be together forever, which is another one that Wolf of Coins mentioned in their comment. And the answer is no. You know what I mean? It's no, because there's no, we all die, as awful and as many nights as I've spent thinking about that, it's inevitable, so there's no such thing as forever for a relationship. So, it's my instinct is to say, no, moron, even if you love each other, someday one of you will die before the other one, or if you're really lucky at the same time, in your sleep, whatever, there's romance for you. I'm not a very romantic person. I'm a very pragmatic person. And so I have those internal biases I have to deal with, right? So how do you answer a question like that? How do I answer a question like that? Well, there are a few ways to go about it. What I do, and again, remember I'm speaking from a place where I don't really get asked questions like that very often, if at all. What I try to do is I try to look at the kernel within the question. You know that if you've watched my videos, I don't believe in rephrasing questions. I don't believe in explaining too much to someone about my methodology. So what I wouldn't do, is engage with a client in the dialogue that I just engaged in with you. So I would likely not share my romantic cosmology with anybody. I likely would not explain the pragmatism of true love. I would not probably explain like the Disney princessification of weddings and romance and all of that. It's not, I don't think, my job as a reader to disavow anyone of their romantic notions. Boy, that sounded really pretentious. I don't think that my job as a reader is to educate anyone in my belief system. I think that if they're curious and they ask, I'm happy to. I think that when it comes to reading for a friend, I'm more likely to. If a friend says, is this my true love? I'm going to say, come on, that's bull. Let's be frank. Like, that's not a thing. But what I won't do is explain that to a client necessarily, again, unless they ask, and no one does. What do I do then, right? Do I answer the question? But I don't believe that that's a real thing. So as I said, where I was trying to get to is like, what I do is I try to look at the kernel of the question, and I try to work within the system that I know works for me. So if someone says, when will I meet my true love, or will I ever meet my true love, or whatnot, I have to look at what they're really asking, which is, am I going to be alone more? Am I going to find someone to love me at any point in my life? Am I destined for misery? Am I destined for a convent? So like the kernel of truth, the kernel of fear underneath that question is, like, am I going to be alone forever? Forever, again, is impossible to. It's like imagining what $1 trillion looks like. We can't imagine it. And while $1 trillion is real, forever isn't. So one of the things that I do, and one of the things that I will explain, is that I really am not, as a reader, capable of predicting further than like 3 to 6 months. And so by giving a time limit out of the gate, by telling them what I'm capable of, really, hey, look, I've found from my experience that if I try to predict further than 6 months, it's not accurate, because there's so much that comes into play in between that time, that I can't get all. I can't do it. And in fact, even 6 months for me, when I do a predictive reading, is, and when I do them, I tend to do like a monthly spread, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What I call the first act, which is month 1, 2, and 3, usually is pretty clear and specific. As we get further into act 2, which is 3, 4, 5, and 6, as we get to 5 and 6, like, it gets muddy. It often seems to be about something else. So I really, in my experience, have found that I have to put a time limit on it anyway. So if someone says, will I ever find my true love? What I'm going to say is, hey, what I can do is actually look at the next 3 to 6 months and see what's there, and then we can look again in 3 to 6 months. And I find that putting a time limit is good in a few ways. One, it's less grim. If I turn around and find out, like, no, you're never going to find you're going to be alone forever, you might as well just move into a cave and grow a beard, and practice, I don't know, illuminating manuscripts, because you're going to be a hermit. That's pretty grim, So, given 3 months, that's a lot easier to handle. Yeah, probably not going to find anyone in the next 3 to 6 months. But also, it's more within my ability as a reader, because I think that, I'm not psychic. I don't have that ability. So all I can do as a reader is explore patterns at play and where they're flowing, and patterns tend to flow for me in 3-month segments. You know what I mean? Or I can see as far as 3 months accurately. So that's one thing that I'll do, is I'll sort of put a boundary on it, a time boundary on a question like that. And I don't rephrase it. I again am looking at the kernel of what they're saying to me, which is, am I going to be alone for the next 3 to 6 months? Am I going to find anyone? Is anyone going to find me interesting? So that's how I do that, or how I would do that. And then when we get to something like, will we be together forever? Again, it's so easy to sort of laugh at that question, as I did, and say, no, you're not. Nothing is forever. But what I have to do, again, is look into the kernel of what they're asking. And what they're asking is, are they going to leave me? Is something bad going to happen? Are they going to die on me? I love this person, and now my sense of self, to a degree, is tied to this person being there with me. I always want to feel good. I don't ever want to lose, I don't ever want to lose them. I'm afraid of that. Can you tell me that I'm safe? So that question is really like, how safe am I with this person? How safe am I in this relationship? And it also comes down to, like, am I good enough for this person? Are they going to stay with me? So, sorry. There's so much, like, baggage and stuff at work when a question like that comes up. I mean, I guess it's possible someone could just want to know, but I feel like the reasons we want to know are, we want to feel safe. And we're never more human. We're never more mortal or vulnerable than, especially in the early stages of falling in love with somebody. Because we realize how at risk we are. And it's a really brave thing to put ourselves at risk. I always say, if anything were to happen in my relationship, I probably would just stay single because after that, because I don't have the energy to go through the beginning of a relationship ever again. And happily, I don't have to worry about that at the moment. But, um, the reason that I feel like I have to go down that road and look at the kernel of what they're really asking is that I have to explore my human empathy. I have to understand the motive behind why they're asking me a question that is very easy to sort of laugh off as silly and juvenile in a way, and I guess to maybe put a more positive spin on it, like a little naive, because you're not, nothing is forever. Now the question becomes, do I go down that path with somebody and say, okay, I understand, that you're really scared of losing. Let's explore that. Probably not, because I'm not a therapist, and also it's probably a pretty alarming thing to have someone you don't know say that to you. So again, what I do is I explore the reason behind the question, and then I look at how I get them what they need, which is that I try to find potential in the 3 to 6 month period I'm capable of doing. Um, but I have never been asked that question, so I can safely say that this is all conjecture. But it's a question that gets asked, and those are questions tarot readers do get asked. And it's easy to it's easy to laugh at them because it's silly, and yet it comes from a place of fear. It comes from wanting to know that we're safe and that we're not going to lose. But we are. I mean, that's the sad reality, is that if we really do sit down and ask that question and get a reading on it, it's going to tell us no at some point, because nothing is forever. It's so grim, right? Nothing is forever. So when it comes to questions like that, these are kind of what I think of as like fate-based questions. It's like the fate of this relationship. It's the fate of my love life. I don't really get into the cosmology behind it. I don't really get into the psychology behind it, but I do try to understand the psychology of it. And I try to answer the question within the boundaries that I've set for myself, which is that I can't really do predictive readings for more than 3 to 6 months, and 3 months is really the most accurate you're going to get. But I do try to empathize with why we ask these questions. Actually, it ties into the same. It's the same in a way kind of question of, are they cheating on me? I talked about that in my third party readings video too, where I said, your impulse as a reader, for a lot of readers, when you get that question, is to say, well, if you need to ask, you already have an answer, and the implication there being like, if you think that you're being cheated on, you're probably being cheated on. And if you're going to ask a tarot reader and not, the person you're with, then you already know the answer, right? And it's funny, and it's maybe it's true to a certain degree, but again, the kernel of that question is, am I safe, or am I good enough? The thing about infidelities is that it's less about sex for the person who's been cheated on and more about worth. An infidelity, when the contract, whether it's, an official or unofficial contract, is that we are a pair and we do not engage in polyamory. If that's the contract of that particular relationship, when one person breaks that contract, the other person, is more concerned about the worth, that they're like the lack of worth they seem to have now, I would say, than the sex. You know what I mean? Like, obviously that's the cause, but the effect is like, as someone who's been cheated on, it's, you put my value and the value of my feelings at a far less level than your libido, at a far lower level than your libido. And so the question of, are they cheating on me, comes out of, what's my value to this person? Am I good enough? Am I enough for this person? Or have they had to go and find it somewhere else? And so when we look at that question that way, you do understand it a little bit more. It doesn't make it easier to answer, but it's easier to not approach it with snark, I guess, because we're all to degrees insecure. You know what I mean? We all, to degrees, want to be made to feel safe from the people in our lives. Um, Maybe monogamy is an unrealistic expectation for a lot of people. I don't know. I certainly don't have the self-esteem to not practice it. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of conversations about that. But when the contract is set, that we are going to be faithful to each other, and one person deviates from that, what happens to the other person is that their worth is diminished. And so when someone asks us, are they cheating on me? In essence, what they're asking is, am I still worthwhile? You know, but we can't really get into that necessarily. We can't look into their eyes and say, I just want you to know you're good enough. I just want you to know that you're safe. Because that's not what they asked us. But if we understand where it's coming from, it makes it easier to approach it with empathy and to approach it with thoughtfulness and to try to find a way in. And if you are a rephraser of questions, if you are someone who will work with a client to find a better way to ask what they're asking, if you don't do third-party readings, I think in that empathy and in that thought of why they're asking that, in that sense of worth and value, you could find an interesting reading in there focused on what in this relationship is making you feel that your value to this person is diminished, that they would be unfaithful. What can you do to increase your sense of self-worth, your increase of self-value, your perception of your own value to this person? You know what I mean? And so even if you don't do third-party readings, in the kernel of why people ask those kinds of questions, you can find, I think, interesting questions to explore with them that cut to really the heart of why they're asking the question and how complicated relationships are to exist within, and our insecurities, you know what I mean? So you can do if you don't feel comfortable doing the will we be together forever reading, you can do a reading on how can I feel safe in this relationship? And what things in this relationship can I look to feel safe? How do I protect myself from feeling unsafe? Assuming, of course, we're not talking about abuse, right? In this case, we're thinking of safety in terms of not losing and not experiencing loss. So there's so much. One of the fascinating things about what we do is how much there is in the reasons why people ask what they ask, and when we pause and explore, I think, the kernels of why people are doing what they're doing and asking what they're asking, we can actually start to proactively anticipate those things. So even as I'm talking now, I'm thinking, I could do a reading I could offer a reading where it's about, for folks in the beginning of a relationship, how do you protect your sense of safety and worth as you surrender yourself a little bit to another person? And so you can almost preempt as a reader what people's psychological motivations are for asking the questions that we make fun of, and address the questions that they kind of secretly want to know but didn't know they wanted to know. So within the context of fate-based questions, I think we can find really interesting readings that explore why people ask those things and kind of preempt the question in a way. And offer those kinds of things to people ahead of time. So anyway, obviously this is, in my typical way, really kind of discursive and long, and explores a lot of different roads. But I think the interesting thing about fate-based questions, or the will I, when will I, the when will I things are interesting because there's I talk about this too, there's an implied result. So when will I find my true love implies that you're going to, and that really is even more complicated, because if you don't, your sense of entitlement is also addressed, you know what I mean? So we have to deal with that, when will I get this promotion? When will I find my true love? You know what? You might not. Now as a reader, I got to figure out how I get in there. How do I get into that psychology? The psychology of entitlement. That's a whole other thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person feels like they're entitled to it consciously, but the choice of the word "when will I get" implies that they think they're going to, and nothing's guaranteed, right? So, very, very curious things, those implied certainties that come from questions, um, and digging into that, you wonder, is there anything I can say that would make them look at this more realistically? I don't know, and I don't want to make this too long and go down that path, but it's interesting stuff. So, thank you to Wolf of Coins for this really fascinating conversation. I'd love to hear your experiences with this stuff and your thoughts. And I will talk to you when I get back from school in August. If I don't make a video before then, who knows? Maybe something will come up. But I leave a week from today, and there's a lot to do. So be good. Have a good summer, and we'll see you in August.